Hello, fellow Toastmasters. Welcome to the Peter Ward Podcast channel. I am your host, Peter Ward. Today's topic is audience analysis. A preliminary analysis before any speech should include an analysis of the audience. Make sure that the speech fits the audience. Knowledge of the subject. What general or specific information about your subject are your listeners apt to possess? How much knowledge can you assume? Attitude. Will listeners be neutral, favorable, or hostile toward the subject and or the speaker? Occupation. Does the audience represent a cross-section of vocations, or are the listeners predominantly teachers, insurancemen, parents, etc.? Gender. Is the audience predominantly male or female, or is it a mixed group? Are the listeners young, old, or middle-aged? Is the audience middle, upper, or lower class? What are the audience's basic beliefs? Political, religious, cultural, or economic? And finally, is the audience a small, intimate group or a larger group, more formal in nature? Now let's hear what Toastmasters International has to say about audience analysis.
Hello, I'm Jay. Thanks for visiting Toastmasters International to learn more about knowing your audiences. Since 1924, we've helped more than 4 million people gain the confidence to communicate in any circumstance. And one of the most demanding situations you'll ever face is speaking to an audience. Here are some time-tested tips to help you prepare so that you feel empowered to impress others. Truly, getting to know your audience begins before you ever present. Have you ever listened to a speaker you couldn't connect with? Worse yet, have you ever been a speaker who couldn't make that connection with your audience? Maybe they didn't laugh at a joke, or they seemed to be ignoring you. Maybe some of them even walked out. Unfortunately, this happens to some speakers. It's the result of an assumption speakers make that all audiences are going to be just like them. Assuming that an audience shares your beliefs, values, and political preferences is dangerous. Never rely on the way people look to judge how they will behave as an audience or react to your presentation. You run the risk of alienating or offending them. Instead, make sure you know something about the culture of the audience you are addressing. So, what should you do? If you're traveling to a foreign country, research its customs and culture online. Know the dress code, food restrictions, humor, and interpersonal communication styles before you leave home. Also, know which gestures should be off limits with that crowd. If you're visiting a company, even one in your own country, you should learn about its corporate culture. Read news reports, websites, and blogs. Write to insiders you have already been introduced to and ask questions. Send polls, surveys, or questionnaires to your upcoming audience if you have access to the attendance list. That's an easy way to learn about your audience without ever leaving your desk. Once you've learned about your audience's culture, it's time to find out what they want from you. The best way to focus your topic correctly and earn appreciation from your audience is to offer them what they came to hear. Let's say you have an advanced degree in biochemistry. If you talk in general about your field, you could be wasting an audience's time. They might be there to hear about your discovery of a potential cure for diabetes. Anything else you discuss will seem unimportant by comparison. It's better if you know what they want to learn before you arrive, so you can tailor your speech to fit their needs. If you can't find out in advance, there are other ways to get to know your audience. When your audience is walking in, take the opportunity to talk with some of the attendees. Introduce yourself and ask them targeted questions to help you understand their culture and their expectations for your speech. You might be surprised by what you hear. Make adjustments as necessary. Some savvy speakers use a technique known as call and response. It's pretty simple and will allow your audience to engage with you while sharing their information fast. Call out questions such as, how many of you were business majors in college? Then wait for hands to go up. Frame your questions to learn as much as you can about their composition and needs. Then use that information to answer their questions. People appreciate it when you take the time to get to know a little about their lives, so it's a good idea to mention a local landmark, event, or specialty, like telling them how much you enjoyed skiing in Switzerland, so long as you're speaking in the Swiss Alps. Whenever it's culturally favored, be sure to use plenty of eye contact and smiles. People generally respond well to a friendly person. Even in a culture that frowns on smiles, you can still make a connection, find out how they bond with their speakers, and try to do what they expect in that regard. It's worth the effort. You'll help them feel more comfortable, and they'll be ready to hear your message. With a little advanced research, preparation, and practice, you will know your audiences and be able to give presentations anywhere.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929. He was an American clergyman and prominent leader of the African American Civil Rights Movement. In 1964, he became the youngest person to receive the Nobel Peace Prize for his work to end racial segregation and discrimination. By the time of his assassination on April 4, 1968, he had refocused his efforts on ending poverty and opposing the Vietnam War. In 1986, Martin Luther King Day was established as a U.S. national holiday. At the start of his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, King, like many fighting for the cause of fairness in society, stated his case boldly and for all levels of society to hear and understand. He highlighted the fact that America's founding fathers were, quote, were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir, unquote. He pointed out that this note guaranteed that all men would be granted the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that America had defaulted on this promise. King's "I Have a Dream" speech is a good example of knowing and respecting your audience. King understood that his audience passionately wanted progress and change, and that they were peaceful, ordinary people. He projected this normality as a stirring and virtuous stand. For example, by saying, quote, "Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred," unquote. King's legacy has several elements. In practical terms, he hastened the civil rights legislation passed during President Lyndon Johnson's administration. This finally signaled an end to institutional racial discrimination in the United States. Perhaps even more significantly, he inspired people and encouraged them through his actions and his words to fight subsequent battles against injustice and discrimination. A less widely recognized legacy is what he did for the art of rhetoric and communication. He showed that millions of people could be moved in peacetime to fight for social causes and social justice. He highlighted the power of public opinion when it is on the march. King was honored in his lifetime, and even more so afterwards. His words still bring heart to many.